about 100 kilometres away from Rouen, where the Tour de France finished yesterday. And why are we here? Because all of the riders in this year's Tour de France are now enjoying a 600-kilometre flight across to the eastern section of France, where the race will resume from Saarburg tomorrow. Tour de France is really having a rest day, but of course for the riders it is more psychological than physiological, because when they get there they'll find their bikes are waiting for them because the mechanics and their managers, well, they've driven through the night. There are two riders who won't be on the flight this morning for very different reasons. One is Eddie Planchet, the Belgian sprinter who won Paris-Roubaix this year by a millimetre. Fittingly enough, he beat Steve Bauer. Eddie Planchet has gone by road because he hates flying. The other one to France is the most important man who is missing, Laurent Fignon, the great Frenchman who continues his love-hate relationship with the Tour de France. This was his 7th Tour de France. He's finished it 4 times, 2 wins, 1 second and a 7th place. What a great record that is. Last year, Laurent Fignon and Greg LeMond were the 2 superstars of this race. Over the 3 weeks, they produced the most exciting Tour de France history has ever known. It became a great battle of seconds between Greg LeMond, the American, and Laurent Fignon. And it was the American Greg LeMond who came out on top in the end. To appreciate the enormity of Greg LeMond's achievement, we must go back to 1986, when, at 25 years of age, he became the first American to win. Greg became the sport's hottest property. But weeks before he was to defend his title, LeMond was accidentally shot when hunting. 200 pellets in his back left him fighting from the brink of death, the 87 Tour forgotten. LeMond had to graduate from a wheelchair, but further illness and injury followed, ruining his 1988 season as well. He never returned to the Tour until last year. Still carrying the shotgun pellets in the wall of his heart, he wasn't finished yet.
And Greg LeMond is announcing his return to the top flight of cycling. He got 2nd place in the time trial final stage of the Tour of Italy, and now he's going top of the leaderboard in the Tour de France. 1:38.12 for Greg LeMond. What a fantastic ride.
Fantastic it certainly was. Unthinkable, yes. A dream, no. Greg LeMond was back.
For me, a goal before the Tour de France was to be in the top 20, maybe win a stage, and now I've already accomplished that with less than a week of racing, and I've taken the yellow jersey. It's beyond all my expectations.
Back from injury, back in the yellow jersey, but keeping it was something else, as Laurent Fignon had his eyes on it too. In the Pyrenees, it became Advantage Fignon. Into the Alps, another time trial, and LeMond was again challenging.
LeMond is back in this Tour de France. We thought he might have lost a lot of time today, but he hasn't. He's come back, and this Tour is certainly not won or lost by Greg LeMond or Pedro Delgado. 1:11.39 for 5th place. That is a marvellous ride by Greg LeMond today. And now, if he can go well in the Alps, this could all go to Versailles in the final time trial.
But Versailles was a long way away. We were only at the gateway to the Alps, with the mountains still in front, including the feared finish at Alpe d'Huez with its 21 hairpinning climbs to nowhere. Fignon was running out of time on the crowded slopes, and he attacked, knowing that twice before he'd taken the yellow jersey here, and twice before he'd gone on to win the Tour de France. Fignon battled it out with Pedro Delgado, the 1988 winner, taking back the leader's jersey. But LeMond was not beaten yet.
Oh, no. There's a lot of traditionalists here that think, oh, whoever has yellow jersey top of Alpe d'Huez is the winner, but that's bull. This race is not over, believe me.
But Fignon was enjoying the Alps, and as they moved to a close, he piled on the pressure, opening his lead to 50 seconds on the road to Villard-de-Lans. In the past, if you win stages when wearing the yellow jersey, history usually said you were the best rider. But the next day to Aix-les-Bains, the top 5 riders escaped the pack, and LeMond gave a typical show of defiance and won the stage. You ain't seen nothing yet, as another famous American once said.
No. 50 seconds is a very good advantage, but I tell you, he's going to have some sleepless nights, because I'm going to give it my all, and anything's possible. If he has a bad day and I have a good day, it's possible to take a minute out of him.
So it's fight all the way?
Not, maybe it's going to be a difference of 10, 20 seconds, but it'll be a very close Tour de France. He won't win. He won't beat me by 50 seconds.
so it all come down to the last dash across Paris. Fignon hated by his press, and the feelings obviously mutual. The final day, a time trial, and the closest finish in Tour history seemed unavoidable. But who was it to be? Le Mans started 2 minutes before Fignon. Almost a minute faster for the 27 kilometres was required for the fairy tale return. On the Champs-Élysées, Le Mans had finished with the best time, leaving just Fignon to come home.
Fignon gets the entourage. He's now within a minute of the line, the long length of the Tour de France down to the finish. It must seem like an eternity.
Well, Fignon's got 43 seconds to do it, Phil. It seems like an awful long way. He's given everything. Look at that armada of motorbikes behind him. It's just going to be on the line, Phil. It's going to be 1 or 2 seconds either way. I really don't know what. It's incredible.
So the Tour de France comes down to the climax it's always threatened it would be. These two men have been Siamese twins throughout the race. Now the cord is broken and it looks like Greg LeMond might, but look at the finish by Fignon. They're all turned off. It's going to be close. 27:47 he must do. The clock is counting down. So are the meters to the line. This is going to be incredible. Fignon is bouncing off the barriers here. He's lost the Tour de France. The crowd has realised it. Colin Fignon has lost the Tour de France. Right on the line as he comes over. 55 seconds his countdown. He has lost the Tour de France by 8 seconds. Can you believe that? Laurent Fignon has lost the Tour and Greg LeMond has won it.
From his deathbed to a second Tour victory, Greg LeMond was voted America's best sportsman of 1989. The first time ever for a cyclist. No one, by the way, has heard the name LeMond in the results this year either. But they will do well to remember they hadn't this time last year. This honest American will haunt all those who try to take his title during the next 3 weeks, and the harder the race gets, the more determined he will be. Well, the departures hall here is packed now with the riders in the Tour de France. Alongside me, Greg LeMond. That was a great time last year, Greg, wasn't it?
It was great memories. It was a highlight of my career.
Now, this year, Greg, Laurent Fignon has gone, your old adversary. You must feel a little bit sorry about that.
I feel bad that he's not able to compete in the biggest race of the year, but I've had many bad moments like that also, so, you know, it's part of the sport. And, you know, I have to say that he didn't have much sympathy for me at the early part of the season when I was riding bad, and he had made some very critical remarks of me, and I'd like to not make those same remarks, and I hope that he recovers and he's in better form for the World Championships.
Now we're heading off down to the Alps, and Steve Bauer has built a tremendous lead in this race. Do you really feel you can cut that back?
I believe so. I think if Steve Bauer has the same condition as 1985 or 88, it could be very difficult. We have the advantage. We have Ronan Pensek, who I think is a little bit better than him on the mountains. He's not only going to have to control Ronan Pensek, but he's going to have to control me. We're going to do everything we can do to make it difficult for him.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we're getting ready to fly here. Well, this year, for the first time, Eastern European riders are in the Tour de France. They've been allowed to turn professional. And to give us the background of that, here's Gary Imlach.
Three years ago, on one of its occasional sorties abroad, the Tour de France started in Berlin. But in the prevailing political climate, it was refused permission to pass through East Germany. Now, of course, all the traffic's the other way. And although it's unlikely that freedom to compete unhindered for the Green Points jersey was uppermost in the minds of those who tore down the Berlin Wall, its impact on world cycling has nonetheless been significant. 2 years ago, East Germany's Olaf Ludwig took Olympic gold in Korea. On Monday, he took the points lead in the Tour de France. And he's just one of a number of strong Eastern Europeans competing in this year's Tour for the first time. Another is Dmitry Konashev, who came second to Greg LeMond in last year's World Championship race. He heads the all-Soviet Alfa Lum team, which is sponsored by an Italian company and was created by a little East-West bargaining. The Soviet Union wanted Italian cycle equipment, the Italians wanted Soviet cyclists.
Of course, there is much change, because 2 or 3 years ago, we couldn't even think about riding in professional races. I couldn't do these things. No, I can. We can't even earn money.
Over at Panasonic, Vyacheslav Ekimov is the only Soviet rider on the team, so his sponsors have found him a Russian family to live with in Belgium, where he spends most of the year. But if that doesn't alleviate the homesickness, the £300,000 a year they're paying him should help. Also earning big money now is Uwe Ampler, another East German, and a winner of the East Bloc equivalent of the Tour de France the Peace Race. If the collapse of communism had come a little earlier, the Ampler name might already be synonymous with Tour success. His father Klaus was a past winner of the Peace Race himself, but retired before ever being allowed to test his quality alongside contemporaries like Jacques Anquetil. The current generation have already proved theirs, though, and the final transition from red to yellow can only be a matter of time.
And the East German riders certainly have made a great impression here. Olaf Ludwig is building a big lead in the green jersey points competition, and Sean Kelly in third place. He's going to have to go some in the mountains if he wants to win that competition for a fifth time. Well, the airport is packing out all of the time, and we've done well to catch up with Steve Bauer, the race leader. Steve, many congratulations for the opening days of the Tour. You couldn't have dreamt at this stage you would hold such a big lead.
Well, things couldn't be going better, actually. You know, I have the yellow jersey still after 5 days, and my team's been defending it very well, and the whole team's riding strongly, so couldn't have gone better. You know, if we win a stage in the next few days, I mean, that would just top things off.
Are you going to win the Tour de France? Is that an unfair question?
Well, it's not within the extraordinary. I mean, it's a possibility that I can win the Tour de France if I'm riding to my maximum. My goals have always been to be on the podium, and I think that's within my capabilities. You know, the first three, I've been fourth once, so I set my goals higher than that, and I think that's more realistic.
Steve, the best of luck for the long road ahead. Well, we can take a break now, and when we come back after the break, we'll have a look at the Mexican rider Raul Alcala, who also feels he can win this Tour de France. And welcome back to our rest day coverage of the Tour de France. We're at Deauville Airport, which is becoming quite packed now as the riders thread through for check-in. Alongside me, Paul Sherry, my co-commentator. Paul, we're coming to the end of the first week of the Tour de France. It's been quite an exciting one, hasn't it?
Well, it's been very interesting. I think probably when it started, we had the 7-11 team taking advantage of all the marking between the main rivals for the Tour de France this year, launching Steve Bauer into the attack. He ended up with a 10-minute lead on the first day. Yesterday, the team totally transformed, defending his lead up to the last kilometres to try and pull the race back together again. I think then we've got the Ariosta team on Monday. They were fantastic. They used a complete team block to launch Argentin into the lead and get that fantastic victory in his first Tour de France. He must have been really pleased with that. I think, as well as that, we've got the Buckler team now, who've taken over from the Super Convex team, who used to be the dominating team of the flat stages, and now it looks as if that's going to be the case for the Buckler team.
Well, I suppose high in everybody's mind today is the retirement of Laurent Fignon. The French are as disappointed with the retirement of Laurent as the English are with the loss at the semi-final stage of the World Cup. Gary Imlach has been living with the Castorama team this last 24 hours because he's driven over to Zareborg with them, and he can now report from the camp there.
Well, understandably, the atmosphere here is about as cheerful as the weather because this is the race that every team trains for. What's more surprising is that it's also a blow to certain English hopes, because although Fignon's the most famous French rider of an all-French team, it's a team that gets its bikes made in England.
Maybe Castorama were attracted to the address. Triumph Road in Nottingham is the home of Raleigh, who've been designing and manufacturing bikes since the last century. Of course, certain design improvements have been made since the 1870s, but the basic principles of construction have remained the same, with frames brazed or welded together. The problem with that is that the high temperatures needed to make the joint good can cause subtle degradation in the steel of the frame, which is why Raleigh have developed Dynatech, the catch-all name for a process which takes the heat out of bike making and replaces it instead with high-tech adhesives. Breaking one of the last links with the penny farthing was the result of long research by engineers in Raleigh's lightweight division. The company believes the improvement in the end product is simple but significant.
Well, largely that we don't heat affect the material, so the material that we use in the bicycle is very much stronger at the end of the process. This means we can either use less material and make it lighter, or we've got a stronger bicycle.
Before the frame, though, comes the fitting. During the winter, Castorama team members had their precise measurements and specific requirements sent to the designers at Nottingham. From these details, individual frames were drawn up for each rider.
Well, they are tailored like a Savile Row suit to fit the individual customer. There's only the fella to ride the bicycle. He hasn't got an engine like a motor car. So he's got to be in an absolutely perfect position to do his work. And we try to tailor it so that it exactly fits into his frame.
And the best way of doing that is still by hand. First, the steel tubes are precisely angled, then cut and mitered so they'll eventually fit together perfectly. Then the assembly and the setting of angles is started. The tubes are brought together using aluminium lugs, then each angle is checked to meet the rider's personal requirements. From here, the secret adhesives are added, and the frame is placed in a low-temperature oven for the bonding process to take place. It's this that replaces the brazing and welding method of construction. After the bonding process, the frame is taken from the oven and the bonds are cleaned. Then the alignment and the angles of the frame are checked again. If they're so much as a millimetre out, they have to be corrected. Once the assembly process is complete, the new frame goes off to be paint sprayed in the distinctive racing colours. And when the other components are added, the result is a ready-to-race machine, which should fit its owner perfectly. So what do the customers make of their new frames?
Oui, certainement que ça nous donne un avantage puisque le vélo est beaucoup plus rigide. On ne chauffe pas.
Yes, obviously it gives us an advantage because the frame is more rigid when the tubes are not heated at the joints. The Reynolds tubes keep all their qualities when they're not heated. The advantage of a more rigid frame is that all your power is transferred to the road.
Yes, it does change a lot. The Dynatek bicycle is more rigid, which allows you to have a compact bicycle which responds better. For example, when descending through fast and tight bends, you can take a better line. Before you had the impression that the bicycle was going to skid in corners, that it was drifting. Now the bicycle will do what you ask it.
So the Castorama Tour effort rolls on, but any realistic hopes we had of an English bike winning this Tour are departing now with number 11, the bike belonging to Laurent Fignon. The best Castorama can really hope for now are some time trial victories and possibly a stage win. Rally, meanwhile, will be hoping that their equipment endures this Tour better than its most famous rider.
Well, I'm joined now by Sean Yates, and Sean, as a rider who's been alongside Laurent Fignon a lot closer than most of us this year, how was he appearing to you in the race?
I think he was, obviously he was not feeling too good because he packed, and when I saw him in the first few stages, he was hanging down the back a bit more than he often does. And he's had a bad crash in the Tour of Italy, so I think that must have been one of the factors in him not being in good shape here.
Well, a little bit more news is, of course, that Marco Giovanetti, the winner of the Tour of Spain, also retired yesterday, and Mathieu Hermans was eliminated, finishing over an hour behind. He'd had a crash at the previous stage. Miller, who came in yesterday, over 5 minutes behind, had also fallen. And this has been an unlucky Tour so far for Robert Miller, and we just hope that he'll be able to recover and challenge again in the mountains, which start towards the middle of next week. One man who is also riding well so far, he's our tip for a high finish, is Raul Alcala. And he's a Mexican rider who really is trying to become the first Mexican to win the Tour de France. Paul Sherwin will give us his background.
Raul Alcala was born on the 3rd of May 1964 in the Mexican town of Monterrey. He grew up in a large and relatively poor family. But now, having tasted the success that cycling has brought him, he lives with his wife in a large modern house in the city of his birth. He's done well for someone who as a child had no ambition for cycling. His first love was in fact another sport.
Well, I was 16 years ago. I'm player soccer, and it was so much difficult for me because I was one of the shortest boys in the team, and I was so much fighting. And I see the race in the criterium, and it was so easy, you know. And I would take my back and go into the race. I beat my first race, and every week I'm looking for the races all the time, and I win easy trophies, you know.
His first major achievement as a professional came in 1987 when he won the white jersey in the Tour de France as the leading young rider, in 9th place overall. In 1989, he moved on to the PDM team and gained his first stage victory in the Tour de France.
and he's going to take it up the line. It's 6.5 hours, a long day today, but the chase is now after him. Too late. Raul Alcala, the first Mexican winner of this surprising Tour de France.
He dedicated this victory to Sebastian, his first child, born a month earlier. This year, his progress has continued with an inspiring victory in the American Tour de Trump. Raul is currently enjoying his role as the team leader with PDM, now that Stephen Rooks and Gert-Jan Tunnischer have moved on to the Panasonic squad.
Yeah, this team is incredible. It was riding perfect. Shane Kelly is one of the best performance in the team, you know, and also him is a lot experience is the best, and also Rudy Danas, Brookin is a good guy. All the guys in the team is perfect.
Raul spent 3 months of the winter off-season training at altitude in the Saddle Mountains above his Monterey home. His sole ambition set on winning this year's Tour de France. It's a big target to aim for, but it's one he thinks he can achieve.
I think this year have a lot of chance because PDM is riding very well. The team is very friendly now. I think you have a lot of chance. They're working for me. Everybody is not jealous now. Everybody is concerned with one guy in the top 10. But now I think I have a lot of chance for winning this year Tour de France.
He has started well and is set to challenge strongly when the race reaches the mountains. But it's concerning that riders of the quality of Steve Bauer and Ronan Poncek have taken a lead of almost 10 minutes.
Well, it's a lot of time, but in the Tour you win, maybe one day you lose 10 minutes very easy, you know? They happen a lot of things in the Tour de France. It's a very strange race.
And you know, if Raul was to win the Tour, I'm sure the whole of Mexico would want to celebrate with him.
Wow, getting crazy in Mexico, I think. I don't know what's happening, but I think it's a big party, no? National party there.
Well, the best man to tell us whether Raul Alcala can win the Tour de France is his old teammate, now with 7-Eleven, of course, Andy Hampsten. Can Raul win the Tour de France, Raul?
He's determined to. He's come a long way. He seems to be a new face to a lot of people, but I've been racing with him since probably 1980 in America in the Coors Classic race, and he's been doing better and better in that. And then since turning pro with our 7-Eleven team, it must have been 4 or 5 years ago, he's really progressed steadily, and he's really paying attention, and he's probably the most determined rider I've ever seen.
Well, let's have a look then at the overall situation on this rest day of the Tour de France. Steve Bauer is on top, of course, with a 34 seconds lead over Ronan Poncek. The best of the favourites as we see them, Raul Alcala is 6th, but over 10 minutes behind. Stephen Roche is 18th, Eric Breking 20th, Greg LeMond, the defending champion, 10 minutes 41 seconds down in 23rd place. Pedro Delgado came up a little bit yesterday, but he's still 82nd. And Robert Miller went backwards, I'm afraid. He lost time. He's back to 157th. Well, as you can see, the riders behind me now are making their way onto the aeroplane. When they arrive at the other end, they'll be getting on the bikes to loosen up after the long journey. This has been an unusual but good start to the Tour de France. The yellow jersey rests on the shoulders of a Canadian. A Canadian has never won the race. Will he do it now? Join us tomorrow at 6:30 when the Tour de France continues on the road from Saarburg.